I knew something was wrong when my wife parked outside the Desert Star Motel and sat there for 3 full minutes with both hands on the steering wheel. I was 2 rows back in my pickup, under a flickering neon sign that buzzed like a trapped insect. My coffee had gone cold in the cup holder. The sun was down, but the heat still lived in the pavement, rising around the tires. Lena got out with a canvas bag pressed against her hip. She looked over her shoulder once, not at me exactly, but at the empty road behind her, and then she climbed the stairs to the second floor. Room 214. A man opened the door. I couldn't see his face clearly. Just a thin arm, a gray sleeve, a shape behind the curtain. Lena stepped inside like she'd been there before. For a minute, I didn't breathe right. I just sat there with my bus keys hanging from the ignition, the little route tag tapping softly against the column, thinking that a man can spend years learning the streets of a city and still not recognize the turn where his own life changes. My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm 38 years old, and I drive a city bus in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Most mornings, my life starts at 4:30 with the coffee maker coughing on the counter. I iron my uniform shirts on Sundays, pack turkey sandwiches in wax paper, and drive the 512 route while the city is still half asleep. I have always been good at noticing people without making them feel watched. That's part of the job. You learn moods through the mirror. At home, I tried not to live that way. With Lena, I tried to be less of an observer and more of a husband. We had been married almost 9 years. She worked as a school counselor at a public high school on the west side, the kind of job that followed her home even when she left her badge in the car. She knew how to sit with silence. When we first met, I thought her gentleness was softness. Later, I learned it was discipline. She was the one who taught me that not every quiet room was dangerous. That mattered because before Lena, silence usually meant someone was leaving. My father disappeared from my life when I was 14. Not in some mysterious crime show way. He just stopped coming back. First he missed dinner, then he missed the weekend. Then my mother stopped saying, "Your dad should be here soon," and started saying, "Eat before it gets cold." His name was Raymond Hayes, and for years I carried it like a coin in my shoe. Small enough to ignore most days, sharp enough to hurt when I stepped wrong. He had promised to come to my last baseball game that spring. I remember standing by the fence afterward with my glove under my arm, watching families fold lawn chairs. My mother said traffic must have been bad. I nodded like I believed her. A week later, his side of the closet was empty. After that, I became the kind of man who liked schedules, routes, timetables. Things that arrived when they said they would. Lena understood that better than anyone. She never mocked my routines. She would leave my travel mug by the sink if I forgot it. On hard days, she would stand in the kitchen with her bare feet on the tile and say, "You don't have to talk yet, just come sit down." For a long time, that was enough to make me feel safe. Then sometime in March, she started coming home late. At first, the reasons made sense. A student had a crisis. A parent meeting ran over. The district office needed paperwork. So I heated her dinner, covered the plate with another plate because we never remembered to buy foil, and waited. But the lateness changed shape. She began taking calls on the back porch after 10. Not long calls. 5 minutes, sometimes less. She'd slide the glass door shut behind her and stand under the porch light, one arm folded tight across her ribs. I couldn't hear everything through the door, just pieces. "No, not yet. He's not ready. Please don't use my name." Once, when I stepped into the living room, she turned her phone face down so fast the plastic case clicked against the coffee table. I told myself not to be that guy. The suspicious husband. The man who turns love into an investigation because he can't manage fear. Lena had never given me a reason not to trust her. And yet there are old wounds that don't ask permission before they start bleeding again. The first physical thing I found was a receipt. It was in the pocket of her denim jacket, the one she threw over the back of the kitchen chair every evening, no matter how many times we said we'd stop cluttering the chairs. I wasn't searching. I was moving it like sit down. The receipt slipped out and landed beside my plate. Men's slippers, disposable razors, extra dark, antiseptic wipes. I stared at the list too long. When Lena came in, she saw it in my hand and froze for half a second. It was so small a reaction that anyone else might have missed it. But I drive for a living. I noticed the half step before someone runs. "What's this?" I asked. She took the receipt and folded it once, twice. "Stuff for the community closet at school. Men's slippers, we get fathers, older brothers, people coming in for meetings. Sometimes families need things. It wasn't impossible. That was the problem. Nothing she said was impossible. Why didn't you mention it?" She looked toward the microwave, where her plate was turning in slow circles. "Because it's not interesting, Danny." She only called me Danny when she wanted me to soften. I let it go, or I pretended to. After that, Every normal thing became evidence against her and against me. If she smiled at her phone, my chest tightened. If she kissed my cheek and went to shower, I stood in the hallway listening to the water run and hated myself. The worst part was that she was still kind. She still wrote bananas on the grocery list, even though she hated them, because she knew I ate one before my morning route. She still reached for me in her sleep. I would lie there with her hand on my chest and feel anger, love, fear, and shame braided together. One Thursday night, I found a key. It was small and brass, tucked inside the old sewing tin Lena kept in the laundry room. I was looking for a safety pin because my uniform cuff had torn. The key was under a spool of blue thread, taped to a folded piece of paper with no label. When Lena came in and saw the tin open, she smiled too quickly. Need something? Safety pin. She reached past me, took one from the lid, and handed it over. Then she closed the tin and put it on the high shelf where we kept things we rarely used. I didn't ask about the key. I should have. That was my first real mistake, maybe not the first, but the first one I can point to and say that was where fear became a choice. Instead, I started watching, not her phone. I never picked it up. There was still a line I wouldn't cross, though I was getting close enough to feel the heat from it. I watched her schedule. I watched which shoes she wore on the nights she said she had late meetings. I watched the mileage on her car and hated myself every time. The Friday I followed her, I told myself I just needed to know. A driver named Miguel owed me a favor, so he took my afternoon route. At 4:18, I watched Lena's white Corolla pull out of the staff lot. She didn't go home. She drove past the storage units and a tire shop with a sun-bleached sign, then toward a strip of old motels near the highway. The Desert Star had peeling turquoise paint and a vending machine that hummed angrily. Lena parked near the stairs. I parked behind a broken ice machine. She got out carrying a canvas bag. Then she walked to the tiny coffee stand next door and bought 2 cups. 2. I watched her carry them carefully, one in each hand, as if spilling them would be the worst thing that could happen that day. Room 214 opened before she knocked. That was what did it. Not the motel, not the bag, not even the 2 coffees. It was the way the door opened before her knuckles touched wood, like the person inside had been watching for her. I drove away before she came back out. People think anger is loud. Mine wasn't. Mine made everything quiet. I stopped at a red light beside an empty bus shelter and looked at my own face in the mirror. I didn't look betrayed. I looked tired. At home, I sat in the driveway until the porch light came on automatically. Lena got back a little after 7. She had groceries, cilantro, milk, a pack of chicken thighs. She kissed the side of my head as she passed my chair. "Long day?" she asked. I almost laughed. "Yeah," I said. "Long day." She made chicken noodle soup because the evenings had been windy. I watched her taste the broth and add pepper. I watched this woman I loved move through our kitchen like home itself. And all I could think was, how can a person be both shelter and storm? The next morning, I found the note. It was in her car. I had taken her keys because my truck was blocked in by the neighbor's moving van. When I reached between the passenger seat and the console for my phone, my fingers brushed paper. Room 214, transfer Friday. Please don't tell Daniel until I'm sure. Under that was a name, Ray. I sat in the driveway with the car door open and the dry cleaning forgotten. Ray. I didn't know a Ray. Lena had never mentioned a Ray. I read the note until the words stopped looking like words. Transfer Friday. Don't tell Daniel. Until I'm sure. Sure of what? Sure she was leaving? Sure he loved her? Sure I would find out and break in whatever way was most convenient for them? That night she folded my shirts. It sounds stupid, but that nearly broke me. She took them from the dryer, shook each one once, smoothed the sleeves, and stacked them on the end of the couch. She had done that for years because she said I folded like a man trying to punish fabric. I stood in the doorway and watched her tuck my uniform shirt into a perfect square. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked. I wanted to say, "Because I think you're destroying me gently." Instead, I said nothing. She came over and touched my arm. "Daniel," I pulled back before I meant to. Her face changed. Not guilt exactly. Pain. That was when I knew silence was no longer protecting anything. The next Friday, she said she had a district meeting. She wore the green cardigan I'd bought her 2 birthdays ago. She put on earrings, then took them off, then put on smaller ones. At 5:40, she left. I waited 20 minutes and followed. This time, I didn't hide behind the ice machine. I parked in the open. I watched her climb the stairs. The man opened the door again. She went inside with a brown envelope under one arm. I got out of the truck. Every step across that parking lot felt unreal. My hand shook when I reached the railing, so I grabbed it hard enough to hurt. I got to room 214 and stopped. Through the door, I heard Lena's voice. Low, careful. He deserves to decide for himself. Then a man's voice answered, thin and rough. I know. I knocked. The room went silent. Lena opened the door. The color drained from her face so completely that for one cruel second I felt satisfied. Then I saw the man behind her. He was sitting on the edge of the bed in a gray sweatshirt, shoulders narrow, hair mostly white. There was a walker near the wall and a pharmacy bag on the table. He looked older than anyone waiting in a motel room for another man's wife had any right to look. "Daniel," Lena said. I held up the note I'd brought from her car. My voice came out calmer than I felt. "Who is Ray?" She didn't answer. The old man closed his eyes. I looked from him to her. "Who is he?" Lena swallowed. Her hands were empty, but she held them like she was carrying something fragile. "Please," she said. "Let's go outside." "No. Daniel, no. You don't get to move the scene because it's uncomfortable." I put the note on the little table by the door. I have been living in my own house like a guest in a conversation everyone else understands. So I'm asking you one more time. Who is Ray? The old man opened his eyes then. They were pale brown, watery, familiar in a way that hit me before my mind could explain it. Lena whispered, "Raymond Hayes is your father. There are sentences that don't enter a room like sound. They enter like weather." For a moment, the motel carpet, the buzzing air conditioner, Lena's frightened face, all of it pulled back as if I were underwater. I looked at the old man again and saw things I didn't want to see. The shape of his mouth, the line between his eyebrows, my own hands, older and thinner, resting on his knees. "No," I said, because it was the only word available. The man looked down. "Daniel." I hated him for saying my name, like he had any right to know how it sounded. I stepped backward out of the room. Lena followed me onto the walkway and closed the door behind her. The desert evening had gone purple at the edges. Cars hissed by on the highway. I gripped the railing and tried to breathe through my nose. "How long?" I asked. 3 weeks. "You've been seeing my father for 3 weeks?" "Not seeing him like that." "Daniel, please, don't." I turned on her. "Do not ask me to make you feel better right now." She nodded, tears in her eyes, but she didn't reach for me. That helped, a little. She told me the story in pieces. A veterans outreach worker had called the school looking for her because Raymond had listed me as an emergency contact, but only remembered I was married to a school counselor named Lena. He had been living in temporary housing after a hospital stay and was waiting for a transfer to a long-term care facility. He didn't have my current number, or he claimed he didn't. He had a letter, an old baseball glove, and some things he wanted me to have. "Why didn't you tell me the second he called?" I asked. "Because the last time we talked about him, you said if he ever came back, you didn't want to know unless he had something real to say. So you decided what counted as real. I decided to check before I put him in front of you. You decided for me." Her mouth trembled. Yes, that one word did more than any explanation could have. She didn't dress it up. She didn't say she had no choice. She didn't tell me I should be grateful. "I was scared," she said. "Not of you. For you." He looked so small and he kept asking if you still drove buses because he saw a city bus once and wondered if it was yours. And I thought, if I bring you some sick old man with a sad story and he hurts you again, I'll never forgive myself. So you lied. I hid it. That's a polished word for lying. She took that like she deserved it. What were the slippers, the razors? He had nothing when they moved him from the shelter. His shoes were falling apart. The motel gave him one towel and a bar of soap. And the key to this room, in case he fell. The caseworker asked if someone local could keep one until the transfer. It all made sense now, and that was worse. The suspicious pieces lined up into a different picture, but they were still pieces she had kept from me. "Did you think I was that fragile?" I asked. She looked at me for a long time. "I think you are strong in every way except the place where he left you." The answer landed too close to truth, so I turned away. I drove for almost 4 hours after that. Not anywhere useful. I drove my own routes without passengers. Past the depot. Past the school. Past the locked baseball field where kids played under bad lights in summer. I stopped at the old field and parked by the fence. The dugouts were empty. A plastic bag rolled across the infield and caught on the first base line. I remembered being 14 with dust on my cleats and my glove under my arm. I remembered pretending not to look toward the parking lot. I remembered my mother saying, "Maybe he got held up." For years I told myself the worst part was that he left. It wasn't. The worst part was that he made me wait. That waiting had followed me into everything. Into the way I checked schedules twice. Into the way I hated unanswered texts. Into the way Lena's quiet calls became betrayal before I had proof. I had built a whole adult life around not being surprised. And still, there I was, sitting outside a locked baseball field with my hands shaking on the wheel. But Lena had been wrong too. That mattered. Understanding my fear didn't erase what she had done with it. She had taken a piece of my life, decided I couldn't hold it yet, and carried it alone. Maybe she did it out of love. Maybe love can still cross a line when it's scared. I went home near dawn. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. Lena sat at the table in the same green cardigan, her hair pulled back badly, like she had done it with shaking hands. 2 cups of coffee sat between us, both untouched. I put my keys down gently, not because I felt gentle, but because I was tired of making pain louder than it had to be. I need to say something, I told her. She nodded. You don't get to protect me from my own life. Not like that, not with secrets. If something belongs to my past, my family, my name, I get to decide what I can handle. I know. I don't think you did know. She looked down. I know now. I sat across from her. The chair creaked under me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Were you going to tell me today? I asked. Yes. The transfer is this afternoon. I was going to bring you the letter first and then ask if you wanted to come. You should have asked 3 weeks ago. I should have. I twisted my wedding ring once around my finger. It had a scratch from the time I caught it on a bus door. I used to hate that scratch. Now I liked it. Proof that something could be damaged and still stay circular. I'm angry, I said. You should be. I also followed you. She looked up. I made you into the worst story in my head because I was scared to ask the first question. That's on me. You were reacting to what I hid. I know. But I still followed you. We sat there in the weak blue light before sunrise, 2 people who loved each other and had hurt each other in completely different languages. Finally, I said, take me to him. Lena closed her eyes. I'm not promising anything, I said. I'm not promising forgiveness. I'm not promising visits. I'm not even promising I'll stay in the room. You decide all of it, she said. No more deciding for me. No more. Room 214 looked smaller in daylight. Raymond Hayes was sitting in a plastic chair by the bed when we arrived, fully dressed though his shirt was buttoned wrong. On the table were a yellowed envelope and a baseball glove so old the leather had gone dark at the seams. Lena stayed by the door. I walked in because my legs were apparently still taking orders from some part of me that hadn't shut down. Raymond tried to stand. I said, don't. He sank back, embarrassed. Up close, he looked less like a villain and more like a man who had run out of places to hide. That didn't absolve him. Frailty is not a refund for damage done. But it made my anger stumble. I had imagined him strong enough to hate properly. Instead, he was sitting there with trembling hands and my eyes. He pushed the glove toward me. I kept it, he said. I didn't touch it. You left before my last game. I know. You promised. I know. The words were too small. They fell between us and didn't cover anything. He picked up the envelope, then set it down again. I wrote you letters for years, never sent them. Why? His mouth worked before sound came out, because sending them would have made me feel brave when I wasn't. Because I told myself your mother could give you a cleaner life without me walking in and out of it. That sounds almost noble. It wasn't. He looked at me then. It was cowardice. I dressed it up because cowards like better words. I hated that he said the right thing. I wanted him to blame my mother, blame money, blame sickness, blame anything so I could keep the old shape of him. But he didn't. He sat there in the cheap motel light and let the ugliness be plain. I don't know what you want from me, I said. Nothing. He coughed into his fist and waited until it passed. That's the truth. I don't need money. The transfer is handled. I don't need a place to stay. I just wanted you to have those. And I wanted to say I'm sorry before someone called you too late. Too late. I looked at Lena. Her eyes were wet, but she was quiet. For once, she wasn't guiding the moment, wasn't cushioning it, wasn't trying to save anyone from the hard edge of the truth. I picked up the glove. It was smaller than I remembered. My name was still written inside in faded black marker. D. Hayes. My father had written it the night before my first Little League practice because I was afraid someone would steal it. Memory is cruel that way. It does not only return the bad things. I sat on the edge of the other bed. For a while, the air conditioner did all the talking. I don't forgive you, I said. Raymond nodded, and his face folded inward. I don't know if I ever will, I understand. But I heard you. He covered his mouth with one hand. His shoulders shook once, silently. I looked away not to spare him, but to spare myself the instinct to comfort him. The meeting lasted 23 minutes. I know because I checked the clock when we left. Old habits. In the parking lot, Lena stood beside me without touching me. Thank you, she said. For what? For going in. I didn't do it for you. I know, but I think part of me had. Not as a reward. Not as forgiveness. More like a recognition that love is not always the same as agreement, and anger is not always the same as ending. Raymond transferred that afternoon to a care facility outside the city. I didn't go with him. I also didn't throw away the envelope. I put it in the drawer beside my side of the bed, next to my spare route tags and the flashlight that needs new batteries. For 2 weeks, I didn't open it. Then one night, I read the first letter and stopped after 3 lines. That was enough for that day. Lena and I did not magically become stronger overnight. People say things like that after a crisis because they want pain to have a clean purpose. Ours didn't. For a while, the house felt careful. We spoke softly, as if loud voices might crack what was left. But we spoke. That was new. She told me when the caseworker called. She told me when Raymond asked if I had visited. She told me when she felt the urge to manage information before it reached me. I told her when fear turned ordinary silence into a story in my head. I told her when I wanted to check her phone. I told her when I hated admitting that. Some conversations ended with us holding hands. Some ended with me walking around the block. Some ended with her crying at the sink while I stood behind her. Just staying, that became our repair. Not one grand apology. Not a single perfect night. Just staying, truthfully, when leaving the room would have been easier. I visited Raymond once more in May. I stayed 12 minutes. He showed me a photo he had kept of me in a baseball uniform, front tooth missing, cap too big. I didn't ask why he kept a photo of a kid he abandoned. I wasn't ready for that answer. Maybe someday I will be. Maybe not. Now most mornings still begin at 4:30. The coffee maker still coughs. My uniform shirts are still stacked too neatly because Lena refuses to let me fold them my way. Sometimes before I leave, I see her standing on the porch in her robe, hair messy, one hand wrapped around a mug. She doesn't ask if we're okay every day anymore. I'm grateful for that. Some questions need room around them. One morning, a few weeks after everything happened, I was driving the early route east as the sun came up over the Sandias. The bus was almost empty. A construction worker slept with his chin on his chest. A woman in scrubs watched the lights spread across the windshield. At a red light, I touched the pocket where my keys rested. The route tag clicked once against the plastic. I thought about my father in a room that was not quite home. I thought about Lena buying slippers for a man I wasn't ready to name. I thought about myself sitting outside a motel, convinced love had betrayed me in the simplest, ugliest way, when the truth was more complicated and somehow more painful. Healing, I'm learning, is not the same as forgetting. It is not pretending the door was never closed, or that the person who closed it had good reasons, or that the waiting didn't shape you. It is not making everyone innocent so the story feels easier to carry. Sometimes healing is just noticing that the old story has reached for the pen again and gently taking it back. That morning, when my shift ended, I went home. Lena was at the kitchen table grading scholarship essays with a red pen and a cup of coffee gone cold beside her. She looked up when I walked in. "Hey," she said. "Hey." Nothing dramatic happened. She didn't make a speech. I didn't either. I crossed the kitchen, put my bus keys in the little blue bowl by the door, and sat down across from her. After a minute, I reached for her hand. She gave it to me.